Professor Reginald Harlan's voice cut through the lecture hall like a blade. "Stand up, you, the one in the back." Darius Cole rose slowly. Dozens of eyes turned toward him. "Yes, you, the diversity admission. Come to the board," Harlan said, a cold smirk on his face. "Prove that a mind like yours can keep pace with the others." Scattered laughter rippled through the room. "Solve this. Prove you belong here." Darius walked to the chalkboard and picked up the chalk. The equation waiting there was wrong, deliberately wrong. Professor Harlan had crafted a trap meant to make him fail in front of everyone. But Darius did not fail. What he did next left the entire room in stunned silence. What would anyone do if a professor tried to set them up to fail? They had truly tried to set him up. To understand what happened next, one must know who Darius Cole really was. A gifted young man born in Roxbury, the poorest neighborhood in Boston. His mother, Lorraine, cleaned office buildings at night. His father had died in a construction accident when Darius was still a boy. There were no tutors, no prep schools, no connections. Only a library card and a mind that saw numbers differently than anyone else. He had taught himself advanced mathematics at a remarkably young age. By the time he reached high school, he was already solving problems that challenged college students. His high school math teacher had called MIT. "You need to see this young man," she said. "He's exceptional." MIT offered him a full scholarship. So did Harvard. So did Whitmore University, one of the most prestigious private institutions on the East Coast. Darius chose Whitmore. It was smaller, more personal. He thought he would be seen there. He was wrong. Whitmore sat on 200 acres of manicured lawns and ivy-covered buildings, carrying the weight of old money, old traditions, and old attitudes. The mathematics department lived in Crawford Hall, a stone building named after the family that had founded the school. Oil paintings of distinguished men lined the hallways, every single one. Out of the incoming class, only a handful of students were black. In Advanced Mathematics, 301, Professor Harlan's elite class, Darius was the only one. Professor Reginald Harlan had ruled the math department for many years. A published author and award-winning teacher, his word was law. Students feared him. Colleagues respected him. Administrators protected him. But there was something else about Harlan, something people whispered about, but never said out loud. In recent years, several black students had enrolled in his advanced class. All of them had left the program. Some transferred to other schools. Others dropped out completely. No formal complaints had ever stuck. Harlan was too powerful, too connected, too careful. He never used slurs in writing. He never left evidence. He simply made certain students feel so unwelcome, so inadequate, so worthless that they quit on their own. Now Darius stood at that same chalkboard, the same place where others had been broken before him. Harlan leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. "We're waiting, Mr. Cole. Or is this too difficult for a scholarship student?" More laughter from the class. Reed Thornton, a wealthy student in the front row, turned around with a grin. "Maybe he needs a calculator or a translator." Harlan did not correct him. He simply smiled. Darius stared at the equation. His heart pounded, but his mind stayed calm. Something was wrong with the second line. The sign change sat outside the square root when it should have been inside. A tiny error, almost invisible. But Darius saw it immediately, and he understood exactly what it meant. If he solved the equation as written, he would get the wrong answer. He would look incompetent. Harlan would fail him in front of everyone. That was the trap. Darius had two choices. He could solve the problem exactly as written and get the wrong answer, confirming every stereotype Harlan believed about students like him. Or he could point out the error and challenge a professor with decades of experience, risking being called arrogant, disrespectful, an angry young man who couldn't accept authority. Either way, Harlan won. Darius's hand trembled slightly. He thought about his mother. Right now, she was probably scrubbing floors in some downtown office building, her knees aching, her back hurting. She hadn't taken a real vacation in years. Every sacrifice she had made, every late night, every missed meal, every dollar saved was for this moment. For Darius to stand in rooms like this and prove that where you come from does not determine where you can go. He could not fail her. He would not. Darius turned around. His voice was quiet, steady, respectful. "Professor Harlan, may I ask a question?" Harlan raised an eyebrow. "Questions. You're supposed to be solving, not asking." "I understand, sir. I just want to confirm. This is the exact equation you want me to solve." "Exactly as written." Harlan's smile flickered for a moment. "Are you suggesting I made a mistake? Decades in this field. And you think I can't write a simple equation?" "No, sir, I'm just confirming. Solve the problem." The room was dead silent. Darius turned back to the board. He raised the chalk and, instead of solving the equation, crossed out the second line and rewrote it correctly. The chalk scratched against the board. Every student held their breath. Darius rewrote the line, clean, correct. The sign change now sat inside the square root, exactly where it belonged. Then he kept going. Line by line, each step flowed naturally from the corrected equation. He set down the chalk and stepped back. The solution was perfect. For a long moment, no one moved. Professor Harlan's face went through several shades. Pink, red, white, then a deep, unfamiliar purple. "What do you think you're doing?" Harlan's voice was barely controlled. His hands gripped the armrests of his chair. Darius turned to face him, calm and respectful. "The equation had an error, sir, in the second line. The sign change was in the wrong position. I corrected it before solving." "You corrected it?" "Yes, sir." "You, a first-year student, corrected my equation." "The math was wrong, sir. I fixed it." The room was absolutely silent. No one breathed. No one blinked. Reed Thornton's grin had vanished. Other students exchanged uneasy glances. Something had happened that had never happened before in this classroom. A student had challenged Reginald Harlan, and the student was right. But Harlan could not acknowledge the correction. His entire identity was built on being the smartest person in every room. Instead, he attacked. "This is exactly what I expected." Harlan stood up slowly. "Arrogance, disrespect, a complete lack of academic discipline." He walked toward Darius, each step deliberate. "You don't correct professors, Mr. Cole. You learn from them. That's how education works, but clearly wherever you came from didn't teach you that." Darius said nothing. He simply stood there. "F for today's examination, and I'm noting this incident in your academic file. Insubordination, challenging faculty authority." Still, Darius remained silent. "You can return to your seat now if you can find it." Darius walked back to his desk and sat down. He didn't look at anyone, but inside his chest, something burned. Not anger, something deeper, something that had been building for years. Class ended some time later. Students filed out quickly, avoiding eye contact with Darius, but one person stayed behind. Dr. Julian Mercer had been sitting in the back row, a visiting professor from Stanford, here to evaluate teaching quality across the department. He had seen everything. Mercer approached Darius in the hallway. "That equation on the board, you spotted the error immediately." Darius looked up, cautious. Another professor, another potential threat. "Yes, sir." "How?" "Most graduate students wouldn't catch that mistake. I almost missed it myself." Darius hesitated. He had learned to hide, to stay invisible. Showing his abilities only made him a target. But something in Mercer's eyes was different. Curiosity, not judgment. "I see patterns," Darius said quietly. "Numbers have shapes to me. When something is wrong, the shape breaks. I notice it." Mercer stared at him for a long moment. "How long have you been studying mathematics?" "Since I was a boy, self-taught from library books." Mercer nodded slowly. Something was clicking into place. "That equation Harlan wrote, it wasn't in any textbook. He created it himself." "I know, sir." You know what that means. Darius met his eyes. It means it wasn't an accident. Mercer's expression darkened. No, it wasn't. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a business card. Come to my office tomorrow afternoon. I think we need to talk. Darius took the card. For the first time since arriving at Whitmore, someone had seen him, truly seen him. But Harlan had seen him too. And Harlan was already planning his next move. What happens when a powerful man realizes he has been exposed by the very student he tried to destroy? The next afternoon, in Mercer's temporary office on the third floor of Crawford Hall, Darius knocked twice. Come in. The office was small, books stacked everywhere, papers covering every surface. Mercer sat behind a cluttered desk, reading glasses perched on his nose. Sit down, Darius. Darius sat. His guard was still up. Years of survival instincts do not disappear because someone hands you a business card. Mercer studied him for a moment. I've been at Stanford for many years. I've taught thousands of students. I've seen talent. I've seen genius. I've seen the difference between the two. He leaned forward. What I saw yesterday, that wasn't just talent. Darius said nothing. I pulled your admission file this morning. Perfect SAT math score. State mathematics champion for several years running. Full scholarship offers from MIT, Harvard, and here. Mercer removed his glasses. Why Whitmore? With your record, you could have gone anywhere. Darius's voice was quiet. I thought smaller would be better. More personal. I thought professors would actually see me here. And instead you got Harlan. Yes, sir. Mercer stood and walked to the window, hands clasped behind his back. I'm going to show you something, and then I'm going to ask you a question. He returned to his desk and pulled out a folder. Inside was a single sheet of paper, covered in handwritten notes. I've been working on this for some time. It's a boundary condition problem in turbulent flow modeling. Every approach I've tried hits a wall. He slid the paper across the desk. Take a look. Darius picked it up. His eyes moved across the equations once, then twice. Something shifted in his expression. His focus deepened. The rest of the room seemed to fade away. Mercer watched him carefully. For a couple of minutes, Darius said nothing. He simply stared at the paper. Then he asked for a blank sheet. Mercer handed him one along with a pen. Darius didn't write equations first. Instead, he drew a shape. A three-dimensional form that looked like a twisted donut. Mercer frowned. What is that? The problem. Darius kept drawing. You're thinking about this in flat space, 2 dimensions, but the boundary isn't flat. He rotated the shape, adding new lines. It curves. It folds back on itself. If you try to model it on a plane, you get discontinuities. The math breaks. Mercer leaned closer. Go on. But if you map it onto a torus instead of a plane, Darius tapped his drawing. The discontinuity disappears. The boundary condition becomes periodic. It loops. He wrote several lines of transformation beneath the drawing. Quick, clean, confident. The problem solved itself. Mercer didn't move. For a long moment he simply stared at the paper. His face moved through confusion, then recognition. Then something that looked almost like shock. Some time now, he whispered. I've been stuck on this. You just solved it in mere minutes. Darius set down the pen. The answer was in the geometry. You just had to see it differently. Mercer fell back in his chair, his hand covering his mouth. Mouth. How? He finally asked. How do you see it like that? Who taught you to think this way? Darius's answer was simple. No one. I taught myself. When you don't have teachers, you find your own way to understand. I see the shapes first. The formulas come after. Mercer was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was heavier. Darius, I need to ask you about yesterday, about Harlan's equation. Darius's expression tightened. This was dangerous territory. What about it? You said the error wasn't accidental. What did you mean? Darius hesitated. Speaking against a professor as powerful as Harlan could end his academic career before it started. But Mercer had seen his gift. Mercer had listened. Maybe, just maybe, Mercer could be trusted. The equation he wrote, Darius began slowly, had a sign error in the second line. The change was outside the square root when it should have been inside. I saw that. Most people wouldn't catch it. That's the point. Darius met Mercer's eyes. If I had solved the equation as written, my answer would have been exactly wrong. Not partially wrong. Exactly wrong. The opposite sign on the final result. Mercer nodded, which would make you look incompetent. Yes, like I didn't understand basic algebraic manipulation, like I didn't belong in an advanced class, and Harlan would have proof. Proof that the diversity student couldn't keep up. Proof that I should be removed from the program. Mercer's jaw tightened. You're saying he deliberately wrote a flawed equation designed specifically to make you fail? Darius didn't blink. I'm saying the equation wasn't in any textbook. He created it himself, and the error was too perfect, too precise. It wasn't a mistake. It was a weapon. Mercer reached into his desk drawer and pulled out another document. A draft of Harlan's upcoming lecture for the academic showcase. I reviewed his work last week, part of my evaluation. He flipped to a page. Look at this proof. Tell me what you see. Darius scanned the page. His eyes stopped on a particular line. Same pattern, he said quietly. The orientation preservation assumption is wrong. He's proving the converse of his own theorem. Mercer closed the folder. He's presenting this at the academic showcase in front of hundreds of people. Parents, donors, the board of trustees, and it's wrong, completely wrong. Their eyes met. What do we do? Darius asked. Mercer shook his head slowly. I don't know yet, but I know one thing for certain. Reginald Harlan isn't just a bad teacher. He's been targeting students like you for years. And if we don't stop him, you won't be his last victim. But stopping a man like Harlan would not be easy, because Harlan had already begun his counterattack. The counterattack came faster than anyone expected. Shortly after the classroom incident, Darius received an official letter from the Dean of Students' office. Academic disciplinary hearing. Charges: insubordination, disrespect toward faculty, conduct unbecoming of a Whitmore student. The hearing was scheduled for the day of the academic showcase, the biggest event of the year. Hundreds of guests, parents, donors, board members, local media, and Darius would be on trial. Harlan had made his move. If he couldn't break Darius in the classroom, he would destroy him publicly, officially, permanently. The news spread through campus like wildfire. Did you hear? That freshman is getting expelled. I heard he cursed a professor. Harlan. No, he tried to fight him. Diversity admissions, man. They can't handle real academics. The rumors grew worse every day, each version more distorted than the last. By the end of the week, many believed Darius had physically threatened a professor. No one asked Darius what actually happened. No one asked for his side. He was already guilty. The trial was just a formality. Mercer tried to intervene. He filed a formal request to testify at the hearing. As a Stanford professor, evaluating teaching quality, his observations should have been relevant. The request was denied. Professor Lionel Hargrove, Harlan's closest friend and chairman of the disciplinary committee, ruled that outside testimony was not applicable to student conduct matters. Mercer pushed harder. He contacted the dean directly. Hours later, he received a phone call from Stanford. Dr. Mercer, we've received some concerning reports about your conduct at Whitmore. What reports? Allegations of inappropriate relationships with students, nothing formal yet, but if these allegations continue, your sabbatical position may need to be reconsidered. The threat was clear. Help Darius lose your career. Mercer had a choice to make. Meanwhile, Serena Holt was having her own crisis of conscience. Serena was a senior, top of her class, and Harlan's teaching assistant for some time. She had always admired him, respected him, defended him. But she had been in that classroom. She had seen the equation. She had watched Darius correct it correctly. And she had seen Harlan's face afterward. Not embarrassment, not surprise, but rage. Pure rage. The rage of someone whose trap had failed. That night, Serena couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about the other students. The ones who came before Darius. Terrell Hayes had transferred after one semester with Harlan. Imani Coleman had dropped out, never finished her degree. Javon Reed had switched majors, given up on mathematics entirely. Several black students, several destroyed dreams, one professor. Was it coincidence or a pattern? Serena made a decision, a dangerous one. She went to Harlan's office after hours and used her TA access code to enter. His computer was still logged in. She searched his emails. What she found made her stomach turn. Emails to Hargrove. Emails to other faculty dating back years. Another diversity case in 301. I'll handle it like the others. The Hayes boy withdrew today. Good riddance. These affirmative action students dilute our program's reputation. And one email sent the night before Darius's first class. New diversity admission starting soon. Full scholarship from Roxbury. Let's see how long this one lasts. Serena took photos of everything. Her hands shook so badly she almost dropped her phone twice. She was about to leave when the office door opened. Harlan stood in the doorway. His eyes moved from Serena to the computer screen. "What are you doing?" Serena couldn't speak. "You're fired." Harlan's voice was ice. "And if you breathe a word of this to anyone, I'll make sure you never work in academia, ever." He stepped closer. "Do you understand me?" Serena ran. She didn't stop until she reached her dorm room. She locked the door and collapsed against it, sobbing. She had the evidence, but she was terrified to use it. Back in his dorm, Darius sat alone at his desk. His textbooks lay open, but he couldn't focus. With the hearing looming, his future would be decided by people who had already made up their minds. The story grips you here. A young man with that kind of gift, and this is how they treat him. It's maddening. But the worst was still coming, because Harlan wasn't just trying to expel Darius anymore. He was trying to erase him completely. What happens when a man with unlimited power decides to destroy someone with unlimited potential? With the hearing approaching, Darius had almost no one on his side. Mercer was being blackmailed into silence. Serena was too terrified to come forward, and every day the rumors grew worse. But Darius wasn't completely alone. As the hearing drew near, Mercer couldn't testify, but he could still investigate. He spent the day in the university archives pulling records, cross-referencing enrollment data, tracking patterns. What he found confirmed his worst suspicions. In recent years, several black students had enrolled in Harlan's advanced mathematics program. Only one had graduated, and that student had transferred to a different advisor after just one semester with Harlan. The others were gone. Transferred, dropped out, switched majors, disappeared from the mathematics department entirely. Mercer documented everything, names, outcomes, but documentation wasn't proof. He needed more. That evening, he made phone calls to former students and former colleagues. Most hung up immediately. The name Harlan made people nervous. But one person called back. Dr. Simone Caldwell, now teaching at a small college elsewhere. She had been Harlan's teaching assistant many years ago. "I always knew something was wrong," she said quietly. "The way he treated certain students, the patterns. But I was young, I was scared. I needed his recommendation. Would you be willing to make a statement?" A long pause. "I have the family now, a career. If I speak up and nothing changes, Harlan will destroy me. What if things could change this time?" Another pause, longer. "Send me what you have, I'll think about it." It wasn't a yes, but it wasn't a no either. The next day, Serena Holt sat in her dorm room staring at her phone. The photos of Harlan's emails were still there, evidence of years of targeted discrimination. She could send them to the dean. She could blow the whole thing open. But Harlan's threat echoed in her mind. "I'll make sure you never work in academia, ever." She was young. Her entire future was in mathematics. Graduate school applications were due soon. She needed recommendations. She needed connections. Harlan controlled all of it. Her phone buzzed. A text from her mother. "So proud of you, sweetie. First one in our family to pursue advanced studies. Love you." Serena's hands trembled. She had worked so hard to get here. Was she really going to throw it all away for a student she barely knew? But then she thought about Darius standing at that chalkboard alone, surrounded by people who wanted him to fail. She thought about Terrell Hayes. She had been his tutor briefly. A smart kid with kind eyes, full of potential. He was working at a grocery store now. His mathematics career had ended before it started. How many more would there be? Serena made a decision. Not the safe one, the right one. She forwarded the photos to a new email address, an anonymous account she created just for this purpose. Then she sent one message to Dean Victoria Lang. "You need to see this." The morning of the hearing, Darius woke early. He hadn't slept much. He put on his only dress shirt, the one his mother had bought him for high school graduation. It was slightly too small now, but it was all he had. His phone rang. "Mom, baby, I couldn't sleep. Tell me the truth. What's happening?" Darius closed his eyes. "Mom, some people here, they don't think I belong. They're trying to push me out." Silence on the line. "Did you do something wrong?" "No, ma'am, I corrected a professor's mistake in front of the class and he didn't like it." More silence. Then his mother's voice came back, harder than before. "Darius Cole, you listen to me." He straightened up instinctively. "I have cleaned toilets for years. I have scrubbed floors on my hands and knees. I have been invisible to people who thought they were better than me." Her voice cracked slightly. "I did all of that so you could stand in rooms like that, so you could be seen, not so you could bow down to liars." "Mom, don't you dare apologize for being right. Don't you dare apologize for being smarter than them. You hear me?" Darius's eyes burned. "Yes, ma'am. You show them who you are. You show them what I raised." "I will, Mom. I love you, baby. I love you too." He hung up, wiped his eyes, and took a deep breath. Whatever happened today, he would face it standing. Meanwhile, the campus buzzed with activity. The academic showcase was the biggest event of the year. Tents on the main lawn, catering trucks, parents arriving in expensive cars. And in the administration building, the disciplinary committee was assembling. Professor Lionel Hargrove sat at the center of the long table. Two other faculty members flanked him. One was known to be neutral. The other had been personally recruited by Harlan. The deck was stacked. Darius arrived at the appointed time. He was directed to a small waiting room. No windows, one chair, a pitcher of water that no one had bothered to fill. He sat alone for what felt like a long while. Finally, a security guard opened the door. "They're ready for you." Darius stood. His legs felt unsteady, but his mind was clear. He walked down the hallway toward the hearing room. Each step echoed against the marble floors. Portraits of distinguished men stared down at him from the walls. Founders, benefactors, trustees. Generations of people who looked nothing like him. He stopped at the door. Behind it sat the people who would decide his future. People who had already made up their minds. People who saw a black student who didn't know his place, but they didn't know what Darius knew. They didn't see what he saw, and they had no idea what he was capable of. Darius pushed open the door. The room was larger than he expected. A long conference table dominated the center. Hargrove sat at the head, flanked by the other committee members. And on the right side of the room, seated like a king on his throne, Professor Reginald Harlan. Their eyes met. Harlan smiled, the smile of a man who had already won. Darius didn't smile back. He simply walked to the single chair on the left side of the room, the defendant's seat. He sat down and waited. But something was different today. Something Harlan didn't know about yet. At that exact moment, Dean Victoria Lang was in her office reading an anonymous email containing photographs of messages that Reginald Harlan never expected anyone to see. The game was about to change. Dean Victoria Lang stared at her computer screen. Her coffee had gone cold long ago. She hadn't noticed. The photographs were damning. Email after email, year after year. a pattern so clear, so deliberate, that it made her physically ill. Another diversity case in 301. I'll handle it like the others. The Coleman girl finally withdrew. One less problem. These affirmative action students don't belong in serious academic programs. But one email made her blood run cold. Sent the night before Darius's first class. New diversity admission starting soon. Full scholarship from Roxbury. Let's see how long this one lasts. This wasn't about academic standards. This was hunting. Lang picked up her phone and called the registrar. I need enrollment records for Advanced Mathematics 301 over recent years. Every student who withdrew, transferred, or changed majors on my desk soon. She hung up and kept reading. The deeper she went, the worse it got. Harlan wasn't just discriminating. He was coordinating. Hargrove knew. At least 2 other faculty members knew. This wasn't one bad professor. This was a system. Lang stood up and walked to her window. The academic showcase was in full swing below. Parents laughing, students posing for photos, donors shaking hands with administrators. And somewhere in the administration building, a disciplinary committee was about to expel an innocent student. She grabbed her jacket and headed for the door. Meanwhile, in the hearing room, Darius was learning the truth. Hargrove was reading the charges. Insubordination, disrespect, conduct unbecoming. But Darius wasn't listening. He was watching Harlan, studying him. The professor sat perfectly still, hands folded, expression calm. The picture of academic authority. Too calm. Darius thought back to that first day. The equation on the board. The mistake in the second line. He had assumed it was a trap, a one-time thing, a test to make him fail. But now, sitting in this room surrounded by Harlan's allies, another possibility emerged. This wasn't spontaneous. This was planned. Long before Darius ever set foot on campus, Harlan hadn't reacted to a threat. He had executed a strategy he had used before, a strategy that had worked every single time until now. Darius's hands tightened on his armrests. He wasn't just a student being disciplined. He was a target chosen before he arrived, marked for elimination. The equation wasn't a test. It was a weapon. And suddenly, everything made sense. The rigged hearing. The stacked committee. The impossible timeline. Harlan wasn't trying to prove Darius was incompetent. He was trying to destroy him before anyone discovered the truth. But it was too late, because at that exact moment, Dean Lang pushed open the hearing room door, and the look on her face told everyone that something had changed. Dean Lang didn't sit down. She stood at the back of the room, arms crossed, watching. Hargrove glanced at her nervously. Dean Lang, this is a closed hearing, faculty only. Continue, Professor Hargrove. I'm simply observing. Her voice was ice. Hargrove swallowed hard and turned back to his papers. Very well. Professor Harlan, please present your case. Harlan rose slowly, confident, theatrical, a man in complete control of his stage. Thank you, Professor Hargrove. Distinguished colleagues. He gestured toward Darius without looking at him. What we have here is a cautionary tale. A student admitted through diversity initiatives, given every advantage, every opportunity. And how does he repay this institution? Harlan paused for effect. With arrogance, with disrespect, with a complete disregard for academic hierarchy. He began pacing. On his very first day in my classroom, Mr. Cole publicly challenged my expertise. He altered my work on the board without permission. He implied in front of the class that a professor with decades of experience had made an error. Harlan shook his head sadly. This is not how scholarship works. This is not how learning works. This is ego, unchecked, undisciplined ego. He turned to the committee. I recommend immediate expulsion for the good of the program, for the good of Whitmore. Hargrove nodded gravely. Thank you, Professor Harlan. Mr. Cole, do you have anything to say in your defense? Darius looked around the room. 3 committee members who had already decided. Harlan smirking in his chair. Dean Lang standing silently in the back. No witnesses, no advocate, no one to speak for him. He thought about his mother working the night shift right now, scrubbing floors, believing her son was safe, believing her sacrifices meant something. He thought about the students who came before him. Terrell, Imani, Javon, all of them broken by this same system, this same man. He thought about walking out, just leaving, accepting defeat, starting over somewhere else. Maybe that was the smart move, the safe move. But then he remembered his mother's words. "Don't you dare apologize for being right." Darius looked up. The equation was wrong. Hargrove frowned. "Excuse me." The equation Professor Harlan wrote on the board. It had an error. In the second line, the sign change was outside the square root. It should have been inside. Harlan's smile flickered. "This is exactly what I'm talking about. Even now, he refuses to accept." "If I had solved it as written," Darius continued, voice steady, "my answer would have been exactly wrong. The opposite sign. It would have proven I didn't understand basic algebra." He looked directly at Harlan. "That equation wasn't a test, Professor. It was a trap." The room went silent. Hargrove cleared his throat. "These are serious accusations, Mr. Cole. Do you have any proof? Check the textbook. That equation isn't in there. Professor Harlan created it himself, specifically for that day, specifically for me." Harlan stood up abruptly. "This is absurd. I will not sit here and be accused by a first-year student who—" "I'd like to hear more." Every head turned to Dean Lang. She stepped forward, folder in hand. "I'd like to hear Mr. Cole explain exactly what was wrong with that equation in detail." Hargrove sputtered. "Dean Lang, this is highly irregular." "Professor Hargrove, given the information I've received this morning, I think we need to be very thorough, very careful." She looked at Darius. "Mr. Cole, there's a chalkboard behind you. Show us what you mean." Darius's heart was pounding, but his mind was calm. This was it. The only chance he would get. He stood up slowly, walked to the chalkboard, and picked up the chalk. His hand trembled slightly, just for a moment. Then he remembered who he was, what he could do, what his mother had raised. "They can take my scholarship," he thought. "They can take my future. But they cannot take what's inside my head." He turned to face the board and began to write. The chalk touched the board. The room held its breath. Darius wrote the first line. The original equation exactly as Harlan had written it weeks ago. "This is what Professor Harlan put on the board." He stepped back so everyone could see. "Line 1 is correct. Standard differential setup. Nothing wrong here." He moved to line 2. "But here, this is where the problem starts." He circled a small section. "When you move a term across the equal sign inside a square root, the sign change happens inside the radical, not outside." He wrote both versions side by side. Professor Harlan wrote it like this. He pointed left. "But it should be like this." He pointed right. Hargrove squinted at the board. "I'm not sure I follow. Let me show you what happens next." Darius kept writing. Line 3, line 4, line 5. Because of that single error in line 2, every following step goes in the wrong direction. The equation doesn't just give a wrong answer, it gives the exact opposite answer. He underlined the final result. "If I had solved the equation as Professor Harlan wrote it, I would have gotten the negative result. The correct answer is positive. Exactly opposite." He turned to face the committee. "To anyone grading the test, it would look like I made a fundamental error. Like I didn't understand basic sign conventions, like I didn't belong in an advanced mathematics class." Silence. Harlan's face had lost all color. "This is ridiculous," he stammered. "A simple mistake. Anyone could—" "Could what, Professor?" Darius's voice was calm, steady, devastating. "Could accidentally write an equation that isn't in any textbook. Could accidentally make an error so precise that it produces the exact opposite answer. Could accidentally do this on the very first day with the only black student in the class at the board. The room was absolutely still. That's not an accident, that's a design. Dean Lang stepped forward. Mr. Cole, can you also demonstrate the correct solution, the complete proof? Yes, ma'am. Darius turned back to the board, and this time, he didn't just correct, he created. Line by line, he rebuilt the equation from scratch. But he didn't stop at the basic solution. He extended it, transformed it, took it places that weren't in any undergraduate textbook. The chalk moved faster now. His confidence grew with each line. He showed the geometric interpretation, drew a three-dimensional shape that made the abstract concrete. When you visualize it this way, he explained, you can see that the boundary condition folds back on itself. It's not linear, it's periodic. He wrote several more lines of transformation. Map it onto a toroidal surface and the discontinuity disappears. The solution becomes elegant, self-contained. He set down the chalk and stepped back. The board was covered with mathematics, not just corrections, but original thinking. Advanced work from a young freshman. For several seconds, no one spoke. Then Dr. Harrison, the neutral committee member, slowly stood up. "My God," he whispered. This is exceptional." He looked at Darius with completely new eyes. "This isn't undergraduate work. This is doctoral level, maybe beyond." Hargrove's face had gone pale. Harlan was gripping the armrests of his chair so hard his knuckles were white. Dean Lang turned to face him. "Professor Harlan, would you like to respond?" Harlan opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. The equation. There may have been a mistake." Darius's voice cut through the room. He turned to face Harlan directly. Years of invisibility. Years of being underestimated. Years of watching people like Harlan look right through him. All of it burned away in this moment. "Professor Harlan, I didn't come to Whitmore to cause trouble. I came to learn, to grow, to honor the sacrifices my mother made working night shifts for years so I could have this chance." His voice remained steady, controlled, powerful. "I sat in the back of your classroom because I didn't want attention. I just wanted to learn." He pointed at the board. "But you didn't see a student. You saw a target, a problem to be eliminated. Just like Terrell Hayes, just like Imani Coleman, just like Javon Reed." Harlan flinched at each name. "I'm not incompetent, Professor. I'm not unqualified. I'm not a diversity admission who doesn't belong." Darius stepped closer. "The truth is the opposite. I spotted your error in seconds. I corrected your work before solving it. I just demonstrated mathematics that you haven't touched in years." The room was absolutely silent. "I don't lack ability, Professor. I have more ability than you've seen in your entire career of teaching." He let that land. "The only mistake I made was assuming you wanted your students to succeed. But you don't. You want certain students to fail. You need them to fail. Because if they succeed, they prove everything you believe is wrong." Harlan's face was gray now. His hands were trembling. Dr. Harrison spoke up again. "Professor Harlan, I think you need to respond to these allegations. The mathematics on that board speaks for itself. Either that equation was an accident, or it wasn't." Hargrove tried to intervene. "Perhaps we should take a recess." "No." Dean Lang's voice was final. "Professor Harlan, did you or did you not deliberately write an incorrect equation designed to make this student fail?" Every eye in the room locked onto Harlan. His mouth opened. His voice came out barely a whisper. "I may have been mistaken." "Mistaken about what, Professor?" Harlan's eyes dropped to the floor. "The equation. It appears there was an error. An accidental error." Silence. "Professor Harlan, was it accidental?" The longest pause of Darius's life. Then, so quietly, that only the front row could hear, "No." The word hung in the air like a bomb that had just detonated. Dr. Harrison sat down heavily. Hargrove put his head in his hands, and Dean Lang pulled out her folder. "Then, I think it's time we discussed the other evidence I received this morning." She opened the folder and placed the first photograph on the table. Let's talk about what you wrote the night before Mr. Cole arrived at Whitmore. The color drained from Harlan's face completely. He knew exactly what was in that folder, and he knew his long career had just ended. Dean Lang spread the photographs across the table, one by one. These are emails from your account, Professor Harlan, sent over the years. She read the first one aloud. Another diversity case in 301. I'll handle it like the others. Harlan didn't move. The Coleman girl finally withdrew. One less problem. Hargrove's face had turned ashen. He was mentioned in several of these emails. And this one sent the night before Mr. Cole started your class. Lang held up the paper. New diversity admission starting soon. Full scholarship from Roxbury. Let's see how long this one lasts. She set it down. This wasn't a mistake, Professor. This was a campaign. Several students, all black, all pushed out of your program. Dr. Harrison stood up abruptly. I move to dismiss all charges against Mr. Cole immediately. Seconded, said the third committee member, speaking for the first time. Hargrove sat frozen. He couldn't second it. He was implicated too. Motion passes. Dean Lang closed the folder. Mr. Cole, you are cleared of all charges. Your academic record will reflect no disciplinary action. But she wasn't finished. Furthermore, I am opening a formal investigation into Professor Harlan's conduct. Effective immediately, he is suspended from all teaching duties. Harlan finally spoke. You can't do this. I have tenure. I have many years here. You have emails, Professor, documenting a pattern of racial discrimination. Your tenure won't protect you from this. She turned to Hargrove. Professor Hargrove, given your involvement in these communications, you are also suspended, pending investigation. Hargrove's mouth opened and closed. No words came out. Dr. Harrison stepped forward. He looked at Darius with something new in his eyes. Respect. Mr. Cole, the academic showcase is still happening outside. Hundreds of people are waiting to see our best and brightest. He glanced at the chalkboard, covered with Darius's work. I believe we've just found our keynote speaker. The room shifted. The air changed. Not long ago, Darius was a defendant, a problem, a target. Now he was being invited to the main stage. But the biggest surprise was still coming, and it would change Darius's life forever. 1 hour later, in the main auditorium, hundreds of people. Parents, donors, board members, faculty, students. And, at the podium, Darius Cole, still wearing his slightly too small graduation shirt, still a young freshman from Roxbury. But everything else had changed. He didn't talk about Harlan. He didn't talk about the hearing. He talked about mathematics, about seeing shapes before formulas, about teaching himself advanced math from library books, about the beauty of numbers when you let them speak. The audience was silent, captivated, seeing something they had never expected. When he finished, the applause started slowly. One person, then many, then the entire room. A standing ovation for a freshman who had almost been expelled hours earlier. Afterward, a woman in an elegant suit approached him. Helena Ashford, CEO of a major technology company and Whitmore's largest donor. Mr. Cole, I'd like to discuss a research fellowship. Full funding, any program you choose. Darius shook her hand. His grip was steady now. Thank you, ma'am. I'd like that. Across the room, Harlan stood near the exit, watching. His face was empty, defeated. Hargrove approached him quietly. Reginald, we should go. Harlan didn't move. His eyes stayed on Darius. Many years, he whispered. I've built this department. He finally turned away. His shoulders slumped. His footsteps echoed in the empty hallway. No applause for him. No handshakes. No future. Just silence. That night, Darius sat in his dorm room. His phone rang. Mom? Baby, how did it go? Darius smiled. Really smiled. For the first time in a long while. Mom, they believed me. Everyone saw. Silence on the line. Then soft crying. I always knew, baby, I always knew. This story resonates because so many have been that young person. Overlooked, doubted, told they didn't belong. And they know how it feels when someone finally sees them. Truly sees them. That's why this story needed to be shared. If you've ever been underestimated, share your story. Others need to hear it too. Pass this along to someone who needs the reminder today. Everyone deserves to be seen.